Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. My guest today is the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres. Thank you very much indeed for being with us today, Mr. Guterres. Now, you announced recently that there are now more refugees from the conflict in Syria than Afghan refugees. I mean, how do you classify the scale of Syria's refugee crisis now?
Well, it's coming close. We have still 2.6 million Afghan refugees and 2.53 million Syrian refugees. But as the number of Syrian refugees is growing by the day, we believe that in a few weeks' time we'll have more Syrian refugees than any other group of refugees in the world. And this gives you an idea of the scale of the problem. I mean, it's not only the dramatic humanitarian impact, it's the physical destruction of the country and the collapse of the state, and the amount of suffering that is absolutely unimaginable. Children, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was in Zatri camp in Jordan visiting a family in a tent. 20 minutes. During those 20 minutes, a young boy of 4 years old, he was constantly with a toy gun shooting, pop, 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 and it was impossible to stop him. Now, this is a whole generation that is traumatized by violence. So it's not only what we see from the point of view of the destruction, from the point of view of the killings, the number of refugees, is a whole generation of young people that will be traumatized, and this impact will last for decades in the future of Syria. So it's really a tragedy that I don't think we have witnessed in the world in the last decades.
Now, officially, according to people who've registered with you, the UNHCR, or who are about to register, I believe nearly 1 million Syrians have crossed the border into neighbouring Lebanon. Does that risk destabilising that country?
Well, I think that's an understatement. Obviously, the impact in Lebanon is unimaginable. It's not only the number of refugees, it's the Syria crisis as a whole. The Lebanese society is divided. Part of it supporting the regime, part of it supporting the opposition.
But with the influx of people, how is that affecting Lebanese society for you?
If you look at a country like France, we are in Paris. The number of refugees per capita in Lebanon is 70 times bigger than the number of refugees in France. So can you imagine what it would happen in France if all of a sudden there would be 70 times more refugees in France than today? I mean, the economy, the society have been dramatically impacted. The schools are overburdened. The hospitals, the health centers, they can't cater for so many people. The infrastructure, the water, the energy, the sewage systems, they are some of them not able to respond anymore. And then, of course, the fact that you have the spillover of the conflict. You have more and more terrorist attacks inside Lebanon because of the Syria crisis. You have all the difficulties in forming a government. It took months. Finally, there was a government that was formed. And the reason was the divisions caused by Syria. So the impact in the Lebanese economy, the Lebanese society, and the Lebanese security is a devastating impact. And the world must support Lebanon. Lebanon has been left alone to a large extent. It is absolutely essential that the international community fully supports Lebanon in this situation, both financial support, not only to the refugees, to the Lebanese economy, but also some burden sharing, accepting some refugees from Lebanon. And I would encourage countries to have resettlement programs or humanitarian admission programs receiving Syrian refugees from Lebanon. Not the numbers will be similar to 1 million, but it will be a symbol of solidarity that I believe the Lebanese people now needs to feel from the international community.
In terms of the world sharing that burden there, how many refugees are we talking? For example, how many refugees do you think European countries should welcome?
Well, we have today about 60,000 Syrian refugees in Europe. 60% of them are in two countries, Germany and Sweden. I have to pay tribute to these two countries that have had indeed a very generous policy in relation to Syrian refugees. But it really breaks my heart, and I think there is something fundamentally wrong when you still have refugees being pushed back at the European border, like in Bulgaria. Or when you see that Syrian families that have come from this horrendous situation in Syria have to risk their lives, drowning on the Mediterranean because they have no other way to try to come to Europe. And being in the hands of smugglers and traffickers that do them the worst possible violations of human rights. I think it would be very important not only for Europe to have the borders open, like we ask Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon. I think the same should happen everywhere, also in Europe, but it would also be very important to have adequate visa policies, humanitarian admission programs like the ones that Germany recently led, family reunification programs, and the possibility to accept a higher number of resettled refugees from the neighboring countries into Europe.
So in terms of numbers, for a country like France, would you want to see perhaps hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Syrian refugees arriving?
We are not giving targets to countries. I mean, we are appealing for countries to increase. France has started with a program of 500, I think, humanitarian admissions. France has also a number of Syrian refugees that came into the French territory. But France is a country that has a meaningful number of refugees in the European context. The largest number of asylum seekers last year in Europe was in France and in Germany. I mean, the two countries usually have the largest number, and then the other country the second largest number. So indeed, France has today an asylum system that is solid. Of course, we would like it to be more developed, more improved, but in any case, we hope that Europe as a whole will accept a larger number of Syrian refugees than today.
Moving back to the immediate Syrian region, establishing refugee camps in Lebanon is a very politically sensitive issue there, given the history of Palestinian refugees. But would you like to see more permanent infrastructures for the huge number of Syrians arriving in Lebanon?
Well, first of all, we don't like camps. We always prefer to have refugees living with the community. And if communities have the capacity to absorb them and to integrate them. The problem is that in Lebanon, the pressure is so big that it would be useful to have a number of sites that could be transit centers where people that have no shelter could be supported during a period, at least a transition period. And we have been discussing with the Lebanese government that possibility. The Lebanese government has been very strongly against the possibility of having camps, I think mainly with the memory of the Palestinian camps that became for decades, I mean, almost
is there any
permanent
movement on that?
But there is another reason, which is, I think, their concern about security problems, and that the camps might become, if not properly managed, a possible source of security problems. But and that is why we are working so closely with other governments when we have camps, in order to try to make sure that the civilian and humanitarian character of camps is maintained, that no weapons enter in the camps, no armed groups recruit there. But that is a challenge, let's be honest, in many circumstances. And so I understand the position of the Lebanese government, but we sincerely would prefer to have the possibility to establish some transit sites or temporary sites, more structured, to avoid what we have sometimes in Lebanon, that is people spontaneously creating their own small camps where they find a place. And of course, that is much more difficult to support. Sometimes these are in areas that are very sensitive to weather changes. We had dramatic problems this winter to make sure that nobody would die because of the cold temperatures. Let's not forget that in the Middle East you have very warm temperatures and very cold temperatures, and you need to deal with both. So indeed, that would be a positive development if possible. But what is remarkable is the generosity of the Lebanese people. We have Syrians in 1,600 locations in Lebanon, and we have many villages and cities in Lebanon that have more Syrians than Lebanese. And the Lebanese have accepted that. And this is something the international community should recognize.
I want to ask you a question, moving topics slightly. The last time I saw you, we were in the Central African Republic in Bangui. Now, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, has proposed sending nearly 12,000 peacekeepers to try and protect civilians there Do you think that will be enough for people in the Central African Republic?
Well, I don't know if 12,000 is enough. What I know is that the present situation is unsustainable. The number of French and African Union troops is totally insufficient because you have widespread violence, and you have violence that is very difficult to control by armed forces. We need armed forces, but we also need police. And we need a local police. And we need at least a minimum of courts and of jails allowing the system to arrest, to trial, and to put in jail those criminals that unfortunately have been multiplying in South African Republic, creating havoc in many areas of the country, including in Bangui, and in a situation that is very difficult to handle by armed forces that have their own rules of engagement, that need to respect the law, and they cannot arrest people forever. They need to handle it to the proper authorities, and those authorities are not there. Let's not forget that the state in Central African Republic, it's not that the state has collapsed. The state doesn't exist. I was with the new president, and I think she is a remarkable person, but she has not 1 cent. I mean, she needs money to pay public servants 2 months' salary of the many that have not been paid to start the rebuilding of the administration, and she has nothing, and nothing is there to provide for the security of the country. So the international presence is essential.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres. Thanks for watching the France 24 interview. Stay with us, the international news continues.